In this real-side experience, I would find myself in what seemed to be some very dense and tightly packed city or town. Nothing especially out of the ordinary with the architecture, very earthly really in the design of the buildings that made up this city. But it surely was a case of too much crammed into too little space. Quite the sense of claustrophobia prominent, as all the people weaved and squeezed past each other in the very narrow walking areas that separated all the high-rise concrete buildings. No hint of anything natural was apparent. I'd have said this was the least likely place I'd want to live in creation, if indeed it was an actual place, maybe a past life, another dimension, or who knows where. Past lifetime experiences and flashbacks very often feature on the real side. People quite content to live in their limited creational lives only would still very likely have such past lifetime glimpses, as life always seeks to show every individual something, to ignite a spark, to perhaps have the individual wanting to begin to see and be more and become more aware, as is the purpose of being in the simulated creations. Or perhaps something from the physical level stimulated an old causal stored memory, and this is then played out on the real side. As we deliberate over current lifetime experiences, it is like replaying the stored memory of them, and we may inadvertently replay reference memories from lifetimes long ago if we happen to stimulate them also, even though we may not realize or understand what it is we are viewing on the real side. For those individuals who are on the process of becoming more aware, who are sincere to constantly step into the unknown and ultimately recognize the is, life and the guides are constant in their providing of experiences on the real side and the physical for the benefit of continuous awareness. Part of the process also is the facing of the personal self, and the way we have constructed its created consciousness, all the ideas, attachments, and agreements that we have decided upon over the millions of lifetimes we have lived. For every idea that makes up the personal self represents a cause and effect tapline that binds us to creation, and unless we want to remain restricted to creational positions where we are locked into a cause and effect mechanism, we need to address and identify all these conscious ideas, and mostly subconscious, then decide on their release. Many subconscious ideas, attachments, and agreements have their roots and origins in older lifetimes, and carry on over into our current lifetime, for the created consciousness is maintained as we move from life to life. It's like a computer we are constantly adding data to, and unless we consciously erase that data, face it and let it go, there it will remain. And agreements and attachments, even from lifetimes long ago, will remain also, as attachments to individuals and situations that may not even be seemingly present in our current positions in life are still retained in the consciousness. Of course, everything is an isness, so everything is here and now, including all our attachments and agreements, even if we can't see them on the surface world with our one-dimensional view. And so, I have found that as we go about our process of tapline releasing, if they are taplines stemming from other lifetimes, then we will have these glimpses and experience flashbacks on the real side as we go about it, and naturally not all of it will make sense if we are dealing with worlds and situations that are beyond the references of the current memory body of the personal self. Of course, the real awareness will know, as it oversees all of the created embodiments and lifetimes ever lived, all here and now in this moment. And often on the real side, when we are in our real awareness, beyond the created consciousness of the personal self, everything will seem to make perfect sense, until we awake and return to the personal self, and perhaps be unable to make head or tail of what we just experienced. This real side experience had that whiff of familiarity, not so much in the scenery, perhaps, but more so the sense of those who I would be interacting with shortly. I almost had a heads up of an impending reacquaintance with an individual that I had known, but who does not feature in my current lifetime. So this just seemed to be a random setting for what would play out. For now, I would enter a building, almost like a classroom, and waiting there would be a woman that presented as though she were in a teaching capacity. Initially, we seemed to get along, but there was an underlying tension that seemed to slowly escalate, and it was as though we gradually would then transition from friendly to worse enemies. As we go through our experiences, the emotional attachments we have with people are forged, and the emotion is not necessarily one of joy or simulated love. It can just as readily be an emotion of hate that attaches and binds individuals together. Such emotional attachments, then, are a kind of interweaving of two personal selves and their created consciousness programming, as though you had meshed two computer games together through data programming, and now they are inseparable, unless you consciously decided to separate the attachment and agreement entanglement, of course. And so, unless these attachments are addressed and released, they are maintained, and we will encounter the same individuals we are tapline bound to, lifetime after lifetime, in various roles and forms. If it is an attachment based on the decided emotion of hate, due perhaps to a situation that occurred between the individuals in a lifetime long ago, then the attachment we have with them will be rather hate-infused. We don't just have our experiences and file them away into the subconscious. We tend to charge them with emotion also, and so we have all these emotionally charged ideas that make up the created consciousness, including emotionally based attachments. And we may then encounter an individual we have old attachments with in a new lifetime and body form, and instantly have a dislike for them, even though this is the first time we have encountered them in this lifetime. Our real awareness affording us insight as to the recognition of them, but the personal self-emotion that was incorporated into the memory of them in the causal body also comes to bear, and sometimes the emotion takes a while to surface. Partners that start off fine, then it becomes abusive, for example. As the surface decided upon love emotion subsides, which was obscuring the underlying subconscious memory infused with hate between the individuals. As we can see, each layer of the self must be put aside to better access the deeper parts of the personal self, from emotion to mental to the intuitive parts, and emotion is rather overbearing and very much blankets out the intuition. And even when people do set aside the love emotion, in then comes the memory body of the past lifetime's association, but it is the emotion of the stored memory that more so makes itself apparent. Anyway, this situation was very much along these lines, a friendly engaging with an individual from a past lifetime, but the underlying emotion of these past lifetime affiliations coming to bear. And it seems this woman was a character that tended to be rather antagonistic in her attitudes. This is the way her created consciousness was overall constructed, as by her design and decision. So indeed, pretty much everyone she encountered, she would embroil into altercation, drama, and emotional turmoil, and my sense was that generally this didn't end well. It was as though she was driven to secure emotional attachments with individuals, draw them into severe drama that would escalate and culminate in either she or they being severely harmed or even killed. And of course, that experience would be retained with this emotional charge in both her and her associates' causal memories. The emotional attachment also retained, and so she would encounter the same individuals lifetime after lifetime, draw them in, and embroil them with more drama that would result in further severe situations. I was among one of the individuals she had locked onto in a previous lifetime, and so this was a case of this tapline being addressed and its potential release, if indeed it was decided to be let go of. This woman wasn't especially aware, though not completely unconscious, as the vast majority are, but she would have difficulty in recognizing the cause and effect ramifications for her clinging onto these attachments. And then, suddenly the scene switched, and I would be with a group of about 20 or so people. All these individuals and I were those that had these attachments with this drama-orientated woman, and very likely had shared experiences throughout many lifetimes with her in the various forms that may have taken, and all would have been drama-orientated, and very severe drama at that. This was rather revealed now, as this group and I were all somehow locked into a sort of series of battle arenas, where we were subject to unimaginable tortures, and all for the amusement of this woman. She would watch over this arena with evident delight as to our sufferings. A few times she would become directly involved also, and drive these armoured vehicles, sprouting metallic spikes, through the arena, maiming anyone who couldn't get out of the way swiftly enough. This arena situation wasn't an actual past life event or experience, as was my impression. The main thrust of this real side experience was to draw my attention to the emotional attachment I and others had with this drama-inclined woman. This just seemed to be the way it was expressed, as an over-exaggerated revealing of the reality of maintaining agreement with an individual of this nature, that it would be a constant drama and probably result in quicker transitions than would make sense or were necessary. The other individuals, the recipients of her torturous attentions, seemed very much locked into their agreements, and specifically their attachments with this woman, and as they seemed somewhat personal self-immersed and unconscious type individuals, it's unlikely they would be at a point yet where they would be seeking to face and work through the personal self and all the attachments that anchored them to creation. So they were perhaps then just assuming roles in this scene, but very real in their own attachments, and doomed to encounter this woman again in future lifetimes, I'm certain. I would attempt to speak with a number of them, as we avoided the swinging blades, and the various other medieval-style hazards that were present, but as I suspected, they simply couldn't grasp what I was conveying to them. Understandable, as they were in this arena fighting for their lives, locked into the personal self-reality of it, So even if they did have a little awareness of their real awareness, they surely were not connected to that at this moment, so were in the worst possible position to grasp the implications and recognition of their cause and effect attachments. Despite how bad experiences may be, we deal with them most effectively through standing indifferent to the created situations occurring around us, by standing in the objective view of our real awareness, the best place to be, to know what to do in every eventuality. If we are in severe situations, we of course have set them in motion, decided on them through the personal self, and cause and effect places us where we have decided, and so we rather have to then deal with it. But this is all part of the wake-up, of facing the personal self, and the facing of creation we have forged for ourselves, and the overall simulator experience situations we have agreed to and contributed also as to their making. If we walk into the effects, but we remain with the personal self, however, we are not only maintaining the agreement causes that are creating these situations, but we are adding to it with more emotional reaction and mental idea considerations, compounding our agreements and attachments with even more ideas that we lock into the created consciousness, and will result in even worse restricting situations as a cause and effect consequence. On an individual level, yes, but on a collective level also. The overall created consciousness, deciding its restriction and compounding itself as it has a tendency to do, especially with the controlling reptilian factors in play, and all this must reflect into the simulator that the created consciousness effects, hence a simulator in demise. I would abandon my efforts to get through to these individuals who were locked into the illusional bubbles of their personal selves, but rather than play out this scene, I attempted to extract myself from it. I would smash a hole through the arena wall and make good my escape attempt. Despite this, the other individuals would remain, representing how locked into their personal selves they were, that they could see no other option than to constantly play out their programmed routines and patterns of decided upon created consciousness behaviours with all the various individuals they had emotional attachments with. They literally couldn't see the hole I had made, because with real awareness you are afforded and can see more options and make better decisions that were always there, but that which you simply couldn't see, as the personal self very much operates in a very limited capacity, based on what it knows, and what it has been taught and indoctrinated with, and rarely do a personal self-immersed individuals move much beyond that which they are comfortable with, and they will deal with situations and people in whatever way they routinely do, but that will just keep them in a very confined and contained reality. If everything they decide stays the same, the experience must remain just as limited. Becoming more aware, then, has us do that which we have never done before, to break up old routines, to create new causes that generate new experiences, that we can see and be more, and the process rolls on. I saw the prudence of extracting myself from a situation rather than just sit in it, as this always is an option. If something gets unbearable, we can simply walk away from it, and perhaps this is what emotionally driven people cannot often realize. It's far better to just disconnect and walk away than perpetuate a situation that makes no sense. But personal self-immersed individuals do relish in drama and emotion, even if it isn't favourable to them. Some people just love to hate, or love to be miserable. For the personal self will latch onto any emotion it can, as it delights in sensations. If it can't have love or joy, it will settle for hate and misery. My escape efforts were not working as intended. The woman had decided to give chase, and she was pursuing me relentlessly through this city, and she was armed with a kind of mace spray that contained acid. Her intention was to spray my face and melt it from my skull, as she took great delight in screaming this intention at me as the chase continued. This seemed to go on forever, a chase that never ended, and we are reminded of how, yes, we can walk away from situations that make no sense to remain in, especially if they are abrasive, but we still need to deal with the agreements and attachments that made these situations so. If we do not, we may have a temporary reprieve, but the agreements are retained, and will cause and effect manifest again, as our personal self retains the programming that will always present this potentiality. We can't outrun the personal self or creation. We can't hide from it. We have to face it, deal with it, and decide its release if we wish to be liberated from the taplines of it. And so, this experience would end with me still on the run from this manic, acid spray clutching woman, and I would awake on the physical. That the emotional attachment had been revealed was so, but running from it wasn't an option, and left unchecked, then this attachment would remain, and I really didn't want this individual featuring in my experience again, or indeed in future lifetimes. And so I placed my intent to continue with this experience, to face it more so, and back onto the real side I would go. Again, I found myself in the arena of doom, all the other individuals running here and there in a panic, but rather unwarranted now, as no devices of torture, no swinging blades and traps were present, though they seemed not to realise, as though they were still locked into their personal self-bubbles of this particular attachment, and perhaps for them they were still seeing these traps and snares. We do see and experience whatever we decide on after all. The woman whose arena this was standing in it also, and beside me. She no longer seemed intent on carrying out her murderous impulses, though still was very rage-infused, and this was directed at me. For standing with us also was Duane, and it was as though, as I returned to this experience, and he had decided to assist, he was speaking with me now and this woman. He would not address the others, as they were locked into their tightly impregnable illusion bubbles, which had them unreachable. They were still playing out their scenes accordingly, but Duane would be very instrumental in de-escalating this situation, at least between this woman and I, for I was rather irate also, despite my best efforts to be indifferent, and yes, it was quite apparent this had to be resolved, this attachment between she and I released. And as I said, she had a little awareness, enough, I think, that Duane could reach out to her also, but my impression was that the drama-orientated way she had created her consciousness was such, and the emotional attachment she had to the drama she created so ingrained and favourable to her, that at this moment she wasn't prepared to let it go. But at least Duane had planted this insight, and she had at least acknowledged the reality of it, and that over time she may well get beyond her personal self-inclinations and move on more so with her own process of awareness. Despite my own anger, I would have no compulsion to cling on to this emotion, and it would fade away, more so created in just the heat of the moment, and I was more than willing to let another nonsensical attachment tapline go, even if she was not. The real side experience ended again, and I would see no more. But I will add that I have witnessed Duane on previous real side experiences removing taplines from people with an equal capability that any real guide possesses. Of course, we must agree to have these taplines removed. As the deciders of our experience, it's always our free will to cling on to the experience-generating ideas of our choosing. But many times the taplines are rather complex, and despite our willingness to have them removed, we are perhaps unable to, where certain taplines are concerned, and so the real guides and Duane do assist in the severing of taplines when they decide that they will. I had the impression that even though I did not have the view of it, that Duane was indeed assisting with the tapline removing that would sever the attachment I had with this woman, and the convoluted interspersing of it that may have featured through who knows how many lifetimes and dimensions. Our created consciousness is quite the tapestry of complexity, and without the guides and Duane, I'd have said it would be impossible to firstly even identify and have revealed to us all the agreements and attachments that make it up, let alone release them without the assistance of the real guides and Duane. We should then surely be grateful for all that they are providing and helping us with, for without them we would be quite possibly trapped in creation forever.
A new presentation is about, has become, etc., and it has graduated to this point to where a lot of information has been provided for people to understand what's going on, but it's not just that, and to realize and recognize what else there is. But the most important thing while we're with this personal self is that we must have the attitude to face everything. So it's not about good or bad or right or wrong anymore. It's not about truth and salvation and all these things that we've known. No, life is an isness, and it is all about facing all of it so that it's okay, so that you become all aware. That's how you do it. You have to face everything. So in the meantime, if people want to stay, things, in other words, stay with things that they've tucked away with themselves, you might say. In other words, we deal with everything. You still have it. You still have your likes and dislikes, but it's not a part of you anymore. In other words, it's not an affirmation to where you live or die for it. Okay, like the old saying, I'm going to die for my country no matter what because I'm a patriot. All this stuff is nonsense. Life is about awareness, a real awareness. And yes, people do have awareness, but there's a lot more that is not seen. And so if a person is willing to go through into the different layers of creation and themselves and all that they've come to know, and this is where we re-experience things so that we will face it and then step into the unknown, because basically the 5 layers of creation and all the dimensions, etc., and then you get to the deep dark border, which is actually the unknown, and willing to step in there and see what else there is to explore and figure out who the real you is beyond all that. So that's a lot. It's a whole lot. So all we can do is provide this, and here you are, and yes, you'll be fine. Just know that I go through things myself here in the personal sense, and sometimes it's a day or two or whatever. It doesn't matter. Take a few naps. Do what you can, but just know you'll get through it, and just come back to be now and start new. And you don't have to hang on to anything, no guilt, no nonsense. Just be wonderful. Everything's okay, and get on with the adventure and have fun. And yes, it is so greatly appreciated that you have stepped up, Kevin, and you do this and you take all this time to have a real life for yourself, actually, to share it with others, because all life is like networking. As we support others, as we become involved in what all life is and support others, well, all life supports us, and all of a sudden we are constantly meeting these new beings that will step up. And this can be through all of creation, including the influence and the deceptors and everything, and simply stepping up, taking on the challenge, because this equals your real awareness, because you've got to do it, otherwise you don't. And so again, sitting in those same old routines and ideas, no, to where you are like life itself, and you are one with all life, which is all awareness. That's the best part. And at the same time, you still get to have fun and play in creation, because you see all these wonderful people that are trying to make it to become more aware. And so it's like you're raising children, and that's what the guides are like. They're like raising us as children also. And I always feel like the kid, and that's fine. Like the little kid at the beach playing in the water and the sun shining, etc., whatever it is, as we get on with this experience, because it's so cool to know that, hey, we don't have to bow and kneel to authorities. We don't have gods to look to. We don't have to pray and do all this hocus pocus nonsense anymore. We can do something that has real value and see others opening up to. So they're okay too. Nobody has to be infected and deceived and all this nonsense that's going on. Yeah, we have to deal with it. It's not here that we're here to change it, but the fun part is to create something that, let's see, if it attracts somebody, and then take on the challenge to educate them, provide a real education that makes sense like never before. So we've surpassed all the spiritual paths and all the religion and all the voodoo and all the nonsense. We're at this new moment now, and so to be a real person, simply face it and figure it out how to just be okay with it no matter what. So it's all for you. Yes, thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much. Great.